What is going on, guys? Chris is here, Delaware K9 Academy. I got something completely unrelated to dog training today. We're actually going to be building a gaming PC. This is the first time I've ever done something like this, so you guys are going to be able to follow along and kind of get my experience from doing this. I have no prior knowledge of doing this, so this will be quite the process. So about the parts I have a Lancool 205 case, Intel i7 9700K CPU. For the graphics card, we have the Geforce GTX 1660 Ti, standard Coolmaster CPU cooler, 650 watt bronze power supply, Z390 motherboard, and we're just gonna rock 16 gigs of RAM and 512 gigabytes of storage. I'm not really gonna be doing too much other than playing a couple games. This isn't going to be, a workstation, so I don't really need a lot of storage or RAM, but this will be good enough for the games that I want to play. So let's get right into it. Let's unbox everything. Let's get started. So now what we're going to do is install the CPU onto the motherboard. This is an extremely easy and quick process. Let me show you. So right here is where the CPU is going to install. So first we need to remove this arm, or move it to the side, so we can remove the initial cover for the CPU. We have the Intel processor right here. We're going to be very careful, only touch this by the sides, and there's a little arrow on the side of in the corner of the CPU. We're just going to line that up and drop it gently in right there. You can give it a little bit of a wiggle, but you don't want to press down hard on this. Now we're going to lower the cover, make sure it's nice and seated, and push down on this arm, and the cover is going to come off. Now the CPU is installed, good to go. All right, so now we have the CPU cooler, and we're gonna have the bracket. We're gonna mount this bracket to the back of the motherboard here using these screws and bolts and nuts. So let's go ahead and let's get this bracket installed. So this will line up on the back side of the CPU. Thread it real lightly just to get it started so we can hold on to it. And there you go, so we have the bracket installed. We can go ahead and tighten these down in like a star pattern, go on opposite sides to prevent any kind of issues. So let me go ahead and get that done. All right, so now we're gonna quickly install the RAM. This is a super easy process. We're gonna do this before we get into installing the cooler, the CPU cooler. This will help just allow us to give a little bit more room. There's a little notch right here on the RAM, so you just wanna line that up and check your specific motherboard and CPU manual for which slot it goes in. For this one, it's slot 2 and 4. So I'm just gonna line this up nice and neat, and then just push down until you hear a snap. Just like that. Take the other RAM, line it up. And push down. Good to go. Okay, so now we're gonna prepare the CPU cooler. First, we're gonna remove the fan. So take a little flathead screwdriver to remove the fan here. Remove the fan on the other side, just like that. You can separate the fan. And then what we're gonna do, this is a little bit of a little tricky part, but what we're gonna do is prepare this bracket to fit through here and on top of the CPU. So what we're gonna do is take the thermal paste, and we're gonna put a dab of the thermal paste, a pea size, right in the very center of the CPU. And now what we're gonna do is take this bracket and feed it through the bottom of the CPU cooler, and there's a little notch for this to seat right in there. And this process may be a little tricky, but take your time and go nice and slow. And we're just gonna line up these brackets with the bolts that are already installed. There we go, took a little while. So now that we have the CPU cooler installed, and these have just been started, the screws. We're gonna take a screwdriver and go ahead and hand tighten each one in a star pattern. And then we can reinstall the fan. All right, so here we have the 512 gigabyte SSD. We're gonna install this in the M2 1 slot, which is right here. All you gotta do is slide it in and secure it, and then use this tiny, tiny, tiny screw to secure the SSD down. Good to go. Okay, now's the fun part where we're gonna put the motherboard inside the case and secure it. First, we have the dust port cover. This is gonna go in the back here. It's gonna be specific to your motherboard. All right, sometimes you gotta mess with that a little bit, but as you can see, we've got it all installed there now. So let's go ahead and get the motherboard in. Okay, so now we're gonna put the motherboard in right here. The port cover is already right here. It's gonna line up perfectly with the motherboard. And we have all these individual standoffs where we're gonna mount the motherboard in here to secure it. So what we're gonna do is take the motherboard and very slowly line it up to make sure it goes exactly where we need it to go. Check the standoff holes, make sure we're good, perfect. Now let's go ahead and tighten down all the screws. All right, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They're nice and tight. We're good to go. Okay, here we have the power supply. We're gonna go ahead and install it in the right spot right here. We already have the cables attached to the back, so we're just gonna slide it right in and screw it up. Power supply's installed. Okay, so now it's time to get the GPU in the case here. I've already removed some of the covers here, the gray covers, so we can fit the GPU in. I'm using the 1660 Ti. So you're gonna go ahead, aim it in just like you did with the RAM. Go. Then we can go ahead and secure the screws back on. All right, guys, so I definitely skipped a couple steps because the cable management was honestly somewhat of a pain trying to figure out where everything goes. But we have the GPU cable coming off the power supply, the PCIe cable going in right here. We have the HD audio cable going back here, and we have the front connections like the power button, everything down here, along with the 24-pin cable there and the other cable, the CPU power cable up there. But we're good to go. Everything is done. Super excited.